about the guy that these thugs came up, ready to steal his car. They're all in their masks and everything. So I guess he was a hunter or something. He shot up in the air. I don't recommend that, by the way. But he gets charged. I got to find out this guy's name and number, and I'm going to hold a fundraiser for lawyer fees for him. He should get a medal for standing up. It's like down in the U.S., we should have the castle law. Someone breaks into your house, and I know any of these people here, someone breaks in your house and they're coming after your kids and you're coming after your spouse, you're going to fight like you've never fought before. You're going to use anything that you have, be it weapons, baseball bats, knives. You're protecting your family.
So what we just saw there was a clip of Ontario Premier Doug Ford remarking on the case of the Lamborghini owner defending his property against auto theft by using a firearm. But since Doug Ford made those remarks, more details have come out about the situation, as that tends to happen. It's probably why people should reserve comment until all the facts are out. But joining me now is Ian Runkle. He's a criminal lawyer with a special interest in firearms law. And I saw his incredible video on his YouTube page, just breaking down what we now know since Doug Ford indicated that he thinks Canadians should be able to defend their home and property using firearms, a statement I actually don't disagree with whatsoever. But Ian, thanks for coming on the show. It's a real pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for allowing us to lean on your expertise here. Tell us what we know now about the case of the Lamborghini owner.
So what we know now is actually very little, and this is the problem. They've said that he's a renter, that he owns this Lamborghini. He was targeted by 5 people who came. We don't know if those 5 people were armed, but frankly, 5 people is armed in and of itself, in the sense that 5 people can pretty easily kill one person, whether or not they're armed with, knives or guns or anything else. 5 people is a potentially lethal threat. It's certainly a concern, but they've charged him, and we have to assume everyone's innocent until and unless proven guilty. But if you assume that the police had some basis to lay the charge, they've charged him with what they've described as discharging a firearm. Now, discharging a firearm is a problem because there's multiple discharging a firearm offenses. It could be discharging a firearm at a person if he was shooting at them, and that would put him, pretty clearly outside the law, because the law says you're allowed to use reasonable force. And the courts have been pretty unanimous in saying that it's not reasonable to kill somebody who's taking your property. Now, that's people disagree with that, but that's the court's position, and that's sort of the established law. If you want to change that, that would require, legislative amendments that we're probably not going to see from this government. And we'd have to have a serious discussion as to whether they were a good idea or not. But they could also be discharging a firearm recklessly, which could, for instance, be firing warning shots into the air. That would be ultimately something the court would have to decide if it was reckless. And one of the factors they'd consider is that this apparently happens in a city, and when you put lead into the air, it comes down. Now, we don't know anything about the type of gun that was used, except that it was a long gun. And there's all sorts of considerations there, too, because if he fires a shotgun with shot into the air, it's not really going to cause any damage when it comes down, especially if it's something like birdshot. So that would probably defeat the reckless discharge if it was into the air and if it was, all of these things. But they've charged him as well with unauthorized possession of prohibited or restricted weapon. Now, a lot of people have said that this means that he's unlicensed, and that is a possibility. It could be that this is a guy, and in that case, we think, well, maybe this guy is involved in some sort of crime. Maybe that's where he got the Lambo, because the Lambo could be that he's a successful person. It could be that he's a person who takes on a lot of debt, or it could be, proceeds of crime. We don't know anything to put him in one category versus the other. So one possibility, if the guy has an unlicensed firearm, is that he could be in that category. But it could be somebody who's a lawful gun owner who has one of the guns that was banned by Trudeau's orders in council.
Could be an AR.
So It could be an AR, but it could be any number of other
Right.
things because,
There's
they
a 410
banned
on that list.
they've got 22s on that list.
Yeah.
They've got all sorts of things. So if he might have grabbed like a bright pink GSG 16 and
Right.
gone out there and, we just don't know what he had. But because of the way the amnesty works, if he's using the gun for something that's outside of the permitted purposes in the amnesty,
Right.
which are largely things like, taking them to a place to have them destroyed, etc., 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 then he'd be in violation of the law that says that he can't have this, and the amnesty provides him with a protection on this. I've already seen a number of people who've been charged for possessing a firearm, and this is even in situations where they were covered by the amnesty, because often what'll happen is, you've got a gun, the police somehow catch wind of it, and when they run it in their system only comes back with prohibited firearm.
Right.
And it doesn't explain to them the whole complexities of the amnesty, so people get charged, and then it's up to a lawyer later to sort it out and go, whoa, this guy's covered by the amnesty. You can't do this. So, it could be that. If the guy grabs his AR, if he grabs any of these banned guns, then that charge would also almost certainly be laid, and he might, in fact, be able to be convicted of it. They charged careless storage, I noticed, but they didn't report that they charged storage contrary to regulations. And so if we assume that that wasn't just an oversight, that suggests somebody who was storing it within the regulations. And we've seen this in the past where somebody who's got it stored in a way that meets regulations, but ends up using a firearm for some sort of defensive purposes, either defense of self or property. And they say, because you could get to the gun, it must not have been stored legitimately. And the thing is that it's actually not all that hard to get a gun that is properly stored and get it ready to operate and ready to use. And especially, I don't know how long these guys were at the Lambo, right? If they're sitting there and if they're spending 5 minutes trying to get into it, well, 5 minutes is a lot of time to get into a gun safe and so forth. So he may well have been able to. In fact, you're probably more likely to be able to get into your safe to protect somebody stealing your car than you are for somebody who's like breaking in and attacking you. But
right.
My concern is that if this guy is a licensed firearm owner, that really they probably should have exercised some discretion here and said, hey, now it depends. Like if this guy is endangering people, then maybe the charges are legitimate and righteous and, a good idea for society. If he comes out with an AR and his warning shots are fired into another building, then that's not cool because somebody lives there and they don't want to get shot. And similarly, the law does not allow for lethal force in defense of property, but warning shots in defense of property have been supported by case law. Now, I don't recommend warning shots as a general principle, but if you're ever in a situation of firing a warning shot, make sure it's as safe as possible. Like, not into the air, into something that is a backstop. Because once, both morally and legally, once you pull a trigger, you own that bullet and the consequences of it up until it stops somewhere. So this applies even if you're hunting. If you are out there and you see a majestic buck and you've got your tag, you better be real sure of not just the buck, but also what's behind the buck. Because if there's unknown land out there, you really don't want to put a hole in some other hunter. You'd have both moral and legal responsibility for that. So, but we don't know any of this, right? The police in Canada tend to be very, very stingy with information, and our courts are very stingy with information. If you compare with the US, in the United States, when they charge somebody, you get a whole charging document that lists a narrative of what the police think happened. In Canada, you can pull those charging documents and they're fundamentally useless for reporters or, YouTubers or the like, because they'll just say on or about the 16th day of whatever, in the town of whatever did discharge a firearm. And you're like, cool, great, fantastic.
Thanks.
So I really, and this also sort of plays into this because the public looks at this and we can see these thieves and we want to know what's happening in terms of this guy as well. And we can't get any of that. We don't, I've got requests in myself as, media going, which which charge of discharging a firearm is it? What kind of firearm is it? Did he have a firearms license? These kinds of things that are really important for us to determine, we don't know. And that's a problem.